Okay, so we're about to begin our first panel entitled New Frontiers in Circularity, which is going to look into new science, breakthroughs in energy efficient and sustainable processes that try to emphasise these closed loops. Our moderator for this session and of course co-chair for the day is Professor Michelle Saracen in Chemical and Biological Engineering here at Princeton and an affiliated faculty with the Andlinger Centre. I'm going to, without further ado, welcome Michelle up and let her introduce her co-panellists. Thanks, Michelle.
Everyone. Okay. Thank you all for coming, and we're excited to kick off our first panel. Andre presented a really challenging and inspiring picture of what we need to do from the technology side, and as researchers, both in academic settings as well as at the frontiers in industry, whether those are at startups or at larger scale systems. And so today, we're going to look at a glimpse of even making this complex problem more complex by not just thinking about a polymer or how we handle carbon from a form of a polymer, but talk about some of the other waste streams that are really important to address when we think about circularity. And as we increase the identity of these waste streams, we obviously increase the complexity and the type of questions that we need to address. And so some of those other waste streams, we can continue to talk about carbon, but carbon in different footprints, such as carbon from the air or carbon from other wastes as opposed to just plastics, such as municipal waste or biological waste. We will also, this is important both for addressing net zero type technology, right? If we need to remove carbon from the air and utilize it in that perspective, or if we want to think about ways to convert carbon that might still be needed in our society that we still need, but may not need to be used from virgin fossil fuel. We'll also talk about metals and minerals. Aluminum is one of those metals that we're really good at recycling, but there's a lot of other ones that are important that we need to address. And this is very critical in battery and energy storage technologies as we start to scale, as we need to scale those to meet energy demands. A little bit about sustainable nitrogen cycles. Right? Nitrogen is an important organic atom in our daily lives, and so nitrogen in the form of ammonia, for example, is a circular process that is interesting and important in many sectors in the chemical industry. And then the one that ties a lot of those together is water, and how we use water either in processes or how water interfaces with some of those waste streams. And so while we might think of water as an infinite resource, it's only infinite in certain forms. And so how do we address both the utilization of water and what exists in that water for these other types of waste streams? And so those are very diverse, and not one person should know all of those things, and so that's why we bring groups of people together to try to address that. So as Chris said, I am Michelle Saracen. I'm an assistant professor in chemical and biological engineering. My group here studies sustainable chemical and fuel production using heterogeneous catalysis. So we study porous materials like zeolites, and the one that's on the news recently, meta-organic frameworks, recently won a Nobel Prize in chemistry. And part of this is looking at waste polyolefin decomposition strategies. And so I have the privilege of moderating this session with experts here. So first we have J.R. Johnson, who is the Vice President of Research and Development at Avnos. And Avnos is a startup company with a technology center up in Bridgewater, New Jersey. So not far, though depending on traffic could be annoying. And so they focus on advancing new materials and processes to reduce the cost of direct air capture, or DAC, or DAC, of carbon dioxide. And he'll go into some details around that. We also have Jason Wren, professor of civil and environmental engineering and the Andlinger Center for Energy and the Environment here at Princeton. He's also the co-founder, chief scientist, and director of Princeton Critical Minerals, formerly known as Pure LI Incorporated, where they are looking at one of the metals that are important, lithium, and other critical minerals needed for a clean energy transition. He is also currently teaching a class entitled Resource Recovery for the Circular Economy. And by currently, I mean like right now. And so some of his students are in the class or in the room. We also have Yiguang Zhu, the Robert Porter Patterson Professor of Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering at Princeton. He's also the head of electromanufacturing at the Princeton Plasma Physics Laboratory, down the road, opposite direction of JR, and co-founder of Princeton New Energy, along with Bruce Kale, another faculty member here at Princeton, which focuses on battery recycling, particularly lithium recovery from using plasma-assisted separations. And so that's a brief glimpse. I'm going to give them all an opportunity to talk about the varied waste streams that they are all experts within, to sort of get everyone on the same page of these challenges, and then we'll go through some additional questions along the way. So JR can take it off. I'll pass this to you.
Thanks, Michelle. Clicker. All right. Oh, all right. Let's just jump in. So I won't take too much time today because the problem, I think, is pretty well, at least known by the audience, I would imagine, in this room. But we're trying to tackle carbon capture, specifically from the atmosphere. And so we can find all kinds of reports. So here's a nice fancy graphic from IPCC, from a few years ago that shows kind of the trend that we're on. And if we want to avoid the 1.5 degrees C rise, then we're going to have to take some measures. So obviously, as we heard earlier, there's a lot of steps you can take from large-scale industrial processes. How do you recycle materials, lower your energy, and so forth? So those are your abatement approaches. And then we look at atmospheric removal, right, as kind of that last step, because it's the step, honestly, that we don't want to do, right, because it's a lot of work. You have to go do this thing, but here's we are is a way to address that final, leg of the race. And so, as they've highlighted here in this report, they say CDR being carbon dioxide removal, right, which is a variety of approaches. So I'm talking about DAC specifically, but there's point source capture, there's direct ocean capture, there's a variety of approaches you can take. So they just kind of lump it all together and say, we need to do some things. So taking another step at this and kind of looking at how do we approach this problem from a society, so how do we abate this, right? So there's a variety of approaches we can do with energy efficiency and, again, recycling and process improvements. But then we're going to get to a point where it's going to become challenged because of the systems and kind of technologies that we have to deal with, such as transportation, right? How do you decarbonize transportation? Yes, EVs are great if you have renewable power and so forth, but so far we're not putting giant batteries in airplanes, right? So there's a variety of solutions that we still have to address, and fuels are still getting us from A to B, especially those that require agriculture, for instance. So kind of what we break down in this chart is things can get really expensive. And so where we're trying to target is direct air capture as a solution to kind of offset some of these other industries, right? And so you can see there's a lot of price targets out there. DOE is $100 a ton and so forth, but we kind of look at this more, holistically and say, look, at $250 a ton, that's our capture price, right? So that's take it from the air, get it into the ground as one way of circularity, to close the loop. We're about 5,000 megatons. If we can get down to $125 a ton, that really unlocks a lot of new opportunity, right, in the space. And that's another 12 gigatons of capture potential that you can now start to justify. As we kind of discussed some of this last night at dinner, is there's certain targets which then make things look a lot more attractive. And that's where we have to try to get towards in this curve. Is there a pointer on this thing? So here's where we're trying to aim for, is to tackle these sectors, right? And so we can look at all the savings potentials and the cost to abate, but the big picture is we have a large chunk that we need to address, and we see direct air capture as being an ideal approach. So real quick, here's our technology. So direct air capture, for everyone in the audience, if you're unfamiliar, is processing air from the atmosphere and removing CO2. There's a lot of companies in this space. We are certainly not the biggest. We're certainly not the most mature. We're only about 5 years old as a company. But our approach is slightly different than others because we remove both water and CO2. So that actually addresses one of Michelle's comments earlier. Water is a waste product for us, which is a bonus and gives us a lot of opportunity for deployment. So high level in our process is we capture water in step 1 through a system that actually contains MOFs. I think that if we scale this quickly, we'll probably be one of the largest users of MOFs in the world if we get there. The second step is now you've got air that's been slightly dehydrated, right? It's not dry, it's not bone dry, but it's removed some of that water. We're going to get back to that in a second. And then we capture CO2 on our next step, right? So that's our CO2 sorbent. And then we have the world's largest computer fan moving all this around. Or is it really small? You guys decide. No. And so then that's your absorption process. But now, of course, you have to desorb. And so what we do is we, through heat integration, release that water into the chamber. And we do something called moisture swing absorption. There's temperature swing, there's pressure swing, there's vacuum temperature swing, there's all kinds of different chemical processes. But we use something called moisture swing, which is relatively nascent in the field. And so the water that we've captured, we actually release as a vapor, and that vapor is then used to reverse the CO2 sorbent, right? So you go from a bicarbonate back to a carbonate and releases that CO2. And so then you have CO2 and water as your stream, and you knock out the water through your compression process, and then you have these two things. So ultimately, we end up being a water producer with CO2 as a byproduct if you do the numbers the other way around. So this is kind of our general approach. So it's a 2-bed process, and we're looking to scale. So I'll end that with, this is our demo plant, well, a rendering. It is currently under construction today with expected starting later this year. And it's up here in Bridgewater, New Jersey. This was funded by the Office of Naval Research, which then ties back into another circularity concept wherein we're trying to, well, we're working with the Office of Naval Research to demonstrate CO2 and water capture all the way towards e-fuels for their end uses.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, thanks Michelle and Chris and Ian for organizing annual meeting this year, and also doing my favorite topic. Like Michelle said, I teach a class called Resource Recovery for Circular Economy. Thanks to actually my students joining today without doing the regular lecture. So if you look at the circular economy, as our keynote mentioned, it's actually 2 circles. It's not 1 circle. 1 circle is generally called carbon cycle. It's really, in this case, you can see I coded some sort of the DOE Bioenergy Technology Office is where how do we circulate carbon, right? And if we want to, for example, we talk about, I really like the remarks, pollution, emission, the fundamental actually challenges, right? If you want to sort of reduce some of the climate impact, we want to keep some of the fossil energy down below the Earth's surface, right? Then we have to circulate the carbon above the surface, right? So where the carbons are, we talk about air, for sure, CO2, right? We talk about the biomass, right? Forest and agriculture, and we talk about all the waste carbon, urban waste carbon like we generate. So that's one, it's generally rely on biology, right? When you circulate. The other part is what we call technical circularity, which is about minerals, and that cannot be transformed. So that I'm basically gonna touch both a little bit using our own experience. So the first one is sort of this some sort of study we did some years ago. When you look at the carbon flow in urban waste, we wasted a lot of our waste. In a way, like you can see, we basically our food waste, our garbage, you go to a landfill that actually generate methane, which is not, greenhouse gas is bad, but on the other side, certainly we can recover a lot of this carbon by producing jet fuels, by producing renewable products like polymers, right, other things. And similar thing as wastewater as well. That wastewater you would consider is really a conduit, as JR said, on a lot of things in water as a media. So that's sort of one thing I've been on a national sort of a committee in past quite a few years to look into how do we make the waste stream into a value stream, especially on the water side. So this is for municipal wastewater. I'm an environmental engineer / chemical engineer. So our traditional way is like how do we use a lot of energy, a lot of chemical, a lot of land to actually clean it up, to convert the carbon, which could be valued to recover into CO2, right? We emit back to the atmosphere. So that's in many ways it's a waste process. So we can actually get into circularity to recover, for example, energy, which by the way, wastewater itself has 10 times of the energy embedded in the water in a format of chemical energy than it used to treat it, meaning you can make the whole industry energy neutral or energy positive. On the other side, there's a lot of carbon in there. There's a lot of nutrients in there. There's a lot of some minerals in there that you can recover, and also you can make the waste into value stream. Not only energy, chemical, water itself, and many other things, right? So that's sort of, I guess, in the high principle, there's a lot of technology development on this end that we can make our waste carbon into valuable products. And one example is, some of you from New York, you probably flew from not JFK, but EWR, and this is an island, a famous island, right? Anybody knows where this island is? It's not a good name. It's Rikers Island, a big prison of New York City, right? So, you can see in the past few years, especially during COVID and after, they were trying to sort of move some of these prisoners to the, to some other else, and they want to sort of converge and open up land of 3 wastewater treatment plants on the island, on Manhattan, and consolidate into a new resource recovery facility on this island to redevelop, because nobody wants to actually live on the like where you live. Rikers, that's not a good, right? Development story, right? So, but in a way, you can open up other land, and then you can build a state-of-the-art resource recovery facility that recover water, again, clean up the water, energy, and other chemicals, right? So that certainly there's a grand vision. We're still in development stage, but I want to see planners and city officials start to think about that way. One other thing I want to change the topic is the second circularity. It's something that generally we think we all have batteries, on your phone, in your car, in humanoid robots soon, right? So in many cases, the minerals in there are not, we can recycle them, but you have to mine at the end of the day. You cannot biorecycling like Earth does, right? It's a non-renewable source. So in that case, we, thanks to Anlinger Center, as I stepped down from the leadership, has spent the past 2 years building on this company with a postdoc. It's called Princeton Critical Minerals out of our research, that really you look into the critical minerals that we can supply from the brine sources. Because currently, most of these minerals you can see, lithium, potash, and nitrate basically are from all these brines where they generally very slow, takes about a decade to build, and it takes about, for example, for lithium, take about a year to produce a batch. And certainly they occupy a lot of land. It's about half of Manhattan size, and also waste a lot of water through evaporation. So in that case, we develop technologies to say, okay, how do we solve this problem, right? So, sorry about the sound. Why don't we listen? I saw we muted it, but let's listen.
This product encompasses a proprietary surface coating that traps all incoming photons on the surface and allows efficient heat conversion to boost brine evaporation. Meanwhile, the coating also prevents salt scaling, ensuring stable performance in lithium production ponds. Thanks to LilyPad's superior heat trapping capabilities, pond surfaces with LilyPad are much warmer than open pond surfaces. Our field tests have shown that the LilyPad is capable of doubling a pond's evaporation rate using only solar energy. The LilyPad's passive nature allows them to be installed or replaced with minimal downtime for the pond.
Yeah, so basically what you can see is that we basically build this very cool, what we call lily pad. It's like, again, the lilies. They float on the pond. They concentrate the solar energy onto the surface. They basically double evaporation. So what that translates is it's super cheap too. I mean, the only IP is our special coating that anti-fouling because this brine about 15 times saltier than seawater. It's like a dish soap if you touch it. So basically what we do, we have made a first sale. It's about $1 million revenue this year to the largest brine lithium company in Chile. And so that's very actually fulfilling to see your fundamental research you can publish, and then we can really translate into real applications to save water, to save land, but also producing something useful, right? Okay, one last slide I want to say, another sort of technology is say, okay, what about the domestic critical mineral? You hear it every day on the news, right? So we cannot build a massive ponds because environmental concerns, and the brine containing lithium is not as good as Chile. So we've also built a sort of, starting again from fundamental research in my lab to sort of scale it up through SBR funding, through venture capital funding, into modular system that you work with your client to really make the process more sustainable. So again, thank you for coming to this meeting, but as really you can see, Princeton Andlinger Center is a place that was actually one of the first actually embedded to our donors' vision to translate fundamental research into real life solutions. Thank you.
Hello. So I'd like to join Jason to thank Chris and Michelle to organize this panel discussion and the symposium. I think this is really come to the right time at the country facing a consequential decision and how to address that circularity about energy and the environment, and also economy, right? So I like to talk two things. I'm not an economist. I cannot talk about the economy, about circularity, but I do understand some of the energy and environmental issue. I talk two things. One is green ammonia. Don't be scared by green. I heard some faculty start to remove the green word from the website. That's really making me really disappointed and sad. We should have our belief, right? We should not change because of the government change. And I want to talk to you first is ammonia. And when Steve Cho took the position of Secretary of Energy in 2008, he came to Princeton. He asked the question that what is the biggest innovation of mankind? And people talk about computers, network, internet, everything. But he said that ammonia. Today we feed 8 billion people on the earth. It's because invention of ammonia. Ammonia generate crops and feed people. But today when we address that the circularity, we have a new role of ammonia because as a hydrogen carrier, because hydrogen is so difficult to store and transport, and also dangerous explosion. But ammonia has a much more merit on that. So there's a lot of effort, particularly in Eastern Asia, and I would say that Japan is and Singapore and China spearhead that ammonia for power. But once you're using ammonia for power, my colleague Rob Sokolow is here, and we brilliant Princeton group, we published a paper saying that if ammonia is 1% of that ammonia for power is converted to N2O, will completely destroy that ozone layers. Significant, that's the circular impact. And in my laboratory, we did experiment that if we burn ammonia below 1,000 Kelvin, 10% of ammonia goes to N2O. It creates detrimental, right? So they not only bring us power, create water and nitrogen, but also create this thing, NO and N2O, that impact ozone layers, smog, and climate. So what are the game changers? The game changers have one, we have to address that the industry water from this power plant and can take using of renewable electricity and make it efficiently to make ammonia compete with Haber-Bosch if we wish. Second thing that we have to develop innovative technology that can eliminate that N2O and NO formation. And then industry, like Japan, is really interested in this. Let's talk about the first thing. What are the new technologies here? So Haber-Bosch is a major process making ammonia. So today that we have renewable electricity, it's difficult to store and intermittent. Can we take that advantage of this, that renewable electricity, to transform into electrons, transform from fossil energy to electron energy? So that we're using electrons to do something cool, catalysis. And catalysis, people think catalyst is catalyst. It's just like, play an active role, lower activation energy, and making things easier. But in plasma, because electrons is so energetic, they transform the catalyst in situ into a nitride. So we call this heterogeneous, metastable, interfacial complexion. So that's a new way of plasma-enabled catalysis process. We just published this paper. You can see this is tungsten oxide, and in the form of a plasma, they form a nitride oxide layers. That increases the further efficiency from 20 to 40%. That is unfortunately, that RPI sent out a letter yesterday that we are going to commercialize the technology and help support. I told my student that this is a silver lining of the cloud. Right. So next thing that I try to see that in the ammonia combustion, the key technology, how do we eliminate that NO and N2? This is that they show you the picture that the first high-pressure ammonia combustion established at Princeton with fully premixing with a lower NOx emission. And we work with BASF, develop plasma technology, try to remove N2O. I think there's a lot of brilliant colleagues at Princeton and a lot of industry around here that makes this happen. So next thing, I try to switch gear in terms of critical minerals. Everybody talking about critical minerals today, and Jason also addressed it. So one of the things that EVs, right? And in the world, I look at the internet that we have, 2025, we're going to sell 23 million vehicles, right? When Andre this morning said, each car has 300 pounds of plastic. So I'm trying to impress Andre that each electric vehicle has more than 300 pounds of cathode materials, right? So China produced 3.3 million tons of cathode materials of lithium-ion batteries. That is 60% of the world output. And in the United States, how do we do it? We dig our holes and make it by ourselves, or we recycle it by ourselves. So there's many ways in terms of doing this. Have anyone visited the lithium-ion battery cathode materials production and recycling facility? Anyone? No? You will see that the capacity is not limited by the process, it's limited by the water pool, blue water pool contaminated with a lot of metal ions there, okay? So how can we do this process without involving wastewater and contaminated waters? So that's a technology that we're talking about a few years ago that Bruce and we have 2 postdocs and filed a patent about this plasma recycling. We take advantage about energetic electrons in the plasma renewable energy so that we directly recycle the cathode materials, which is contaminated by fluorine in the electrolyte, and without going any kind of water, and form recycling and upgrade into a new cathode materials. So you can see the plasma is here. It looks very beautiful and cool. So I think that this is how the academic research fundamental and engage with a challenge of energy environment, create new ideas and provide solutions. And thank you very much for the opportunity, and I hope to work to discuss together to find a pathway towards it. I think that we have to stick our ground, that fundamental discovery is the science research, is the solution towards circularity, no matter what. So thank you.
So these were all very helpful insights into diverse chemistries and diverse technologies. And so as we think about the frontiers, and often the frontiers are started with an idea and maybe a hypothesis and a testing of that. And a graduate student, when you get a positive result, you get excited about it. And so those are the desires that we have to make progress in these fields. So I guess, what is something in your area that's either you are working on in your capacity or others are working on in related systems that has really excited you in this space?
I think, well, again, maybe it's selfish because what we're doing, but I think our approach to direct air capture where we're not consuming water is a big part that drew me to the company to leave my prior employment, because I think that's going to be our kind of license to operate, and it's going to be important for deployment of these types of technologies in the places where you may not be able to, right? So, Climeworks has positioned themselves in Iceland very strategically. They have power available through geothermal and so forth, and sequestration solutions. So they've kind of built their technology there, but we're trying to aim towards where else can we put this, where it makes sense. And water, as we keep talking about, as a resource problem is going to be a challenge. And so I think that's what's really exciting about what we're trying to do is do this whole thing by minimizing our burden. Obviously, we're still going to need power, right? That's a non-starter. Thermal has to be paid for by somebody. So I think it's really exciting about what we're doing in our labs.
I have to say, nowadays, especially in my area, I mean, there's not as many as exciting things happening actually as compared to past few years. But I really love what actually our trustee and Paul mentioned, where we are the break. It is in many cases. I mean, my class, we basically analyze a lot of technologies, a lot of pathways that we can achieve circularity. And sometimes we got too excited, oh, there's a great idea, let's publish a paper and let's do something with it. And we lack sort of the fundamental sort of needs of doing techno-economic analysis, right? Doing the life cycle analysis to see, does it even really make impact? Does it actually, this technology really gonna make it actually to say how many tons of CO2 you're gonna actually capture? And what's the value of the product gonna have that gonna make a dent, right? In many cases, that actually give us time. I'm actually so blessed to be in Princeton to actually think, okay, this is a period we reflect, okay, where we should go, right? We don't want to be in a bubble, right? So that's actually gonna hurt us even worse later on, right? So that's, I guess, in many cases, I'm not saying I'm excited about it, to be honest, but it's really, to me, it's opportunity for us to think, okay, should we actually have more practical solutions to actually achieve our final goal?
I want to share with you that many people believe, including my wife, that professors always teach students. Actually, I want to share with you that to me, it's upside. And I came to Princeton basically because Einstein, that is a science, beauty of science. You never worry about the application, never about anything. When I first day I came to Princeton, one of my colleagues said, Guang, what's your theory? What's your equation? Seems like I don't have an equation, I cannot survive in tenure at Princeton. So that was the culture of Princeton 25 years ago, right? But 2017, when I visited Stanford, there was give a lecture. They have 5 undergraduate students escorted me to the faculty lounge. And I asked them, how do you choose your advisor for senior thesis? 5 of them. We look at the website to see whether they have a startup. If they don't, we're not going to choose them. So that time was really shocked me. So what if I was a professor at Stanford, nobody would choose me anymore? So I disqualified me as a professor. Then I fly back on an airplane. What am I doing? So I'm a professor at mechanical and aerospace engineering. What is engineering versus science? Science is beautiful, engineering may not be beautiful, but provide a solution. So then I start to think of what engineering is. Engineering is to try to create something never existed before and benefit the world. So that, I haven't done anything about that. So I think I wrote a first patent, and in 2017, I created a company called Hidden Nano, making. So, and the second thing, with Bruce, we wrote a second one for the Princeton New Energy. Now it's about a fourth company. I think that if we truly believe that the world is constrained by the carbon emission and the climate, and we have to do something to provide a solution that is so-called engineering. So I picked two areas. One is ammonia, which is big, and I believe Steve Chu is a Nobel Prize laureate. And the second one is that is a energy storage, electric vehicles, electrification. I believe electrification will replace fossil fuel in the long term. Thank you very much.
Just want to add, Princeton still loves you. Be here.
I think maybe a point that you both addressed, and actually JR and I were talking about this last night at dinner, was, you know, there's the theory that we teach, and then there's the practicality, right? And so engineering, we're engineers on this stage. No offense to others who are not engineers, but we're taught to take science and apply it for societal good. And the important part is how do the students at different stages in their education find that how you touch those scales and that societal good, right? So sometimes it's taking a step back and actually doing the techno-economical analysis or an LCA, or sometimes it's just going to see a plant that's being built. And so how do you think of, you know, both new people in the field as they join companies, or students that you're teaching in the classroom or in your labs? How do you sort of give that grounding in the practicality of these solutions while still finding the excitement within the science and the day-to-day that might not be at that scale?
So I have to say, what very fulfilling to me, I used to really see what's the most fulfilling a moment is when I have meetings with students, when you have like a great discoveries in science, when you get a perfect data, you can, we publish this maybe a Nature paper, right? Something like really gonna, and also teaching a class to students, so I got it, I got a great idea, writing good reports. But I have to say, in the past year or two, while I was building sort of this startup with my former students, and we actually grew from 2 of us to 15 full-time employees right now. It's really when you see the moment that all this lily pad actually floating on the real largest pond that's gonna basically boost the production of the mineral. And that's actually very fulfilling sort of moment for me. It's really, I mean, certainly, startup is not, for me, it's not only you want to make money, you want to be successful. In many cases, why would one moment I imagine, wow, if all this like 1,000 of hectares of ponds gonna be covered by lily pad, I can see it from Google Earth. That's awesome when you think about that, right? So that's sort of give you a hope that you can make real world impact beyond the academic community. Oh, probably like a couple hundred people, couple thousand people read my Nature paper, and yet what our product can benefit everyone in this world who gonna use batteries, right? That actually give you a sort of a feeling of purpose that your research does matter. So that's, I guess, in many cases, that's sort of I learned a lot actually in the past year.
I just want to add a little bit. So normally I teach algorithm propulsion and rockets at Princeton. If you look at the entire history of aerospace and propulsion, is continuous innovation and address the problems and enabling, right? So I think that when I thought about that, in the energy area, we have much more profound challenge in terms of carbon and the environment. And what we should be doing in academics, not only just publish a paper in Nature Science, but really want to solve the real challenges and enabling things that we cannot be doing before. I think I start to see that we focus on educated students, become professor, and now we start to see that a student working in startups, they enjoy being a CTO, being a CEO, and then present a beautiful story and beautiful solution to their family members, to society, and then that makes them happy. I think that is really that I really inspired by them. Not that I try to inspire them.
I don't have any students. But I think what ties this together is, so I started in academia, spent a few years there, and then bounced around different large companies, and then came to a startup. But throughout this whole time, I've always been kind of grounded in applied research, right? So engineering, right, conventional, but with that notion of, all right, do you understand it? And where I'm going with this is, in all these projects that I've done, and even throughout my time in industry, I've worked with a lot of universities, and I think that part of the engagement of like, all right, coming from the company side of here's the problem we're trying to solve, or the big picture, right? Trying to connect those dots to show them like why the science is important, and here's the outlet, right? And so, yeah, we can point to all kinds of papers in science and nature and whatever, but I think that's the ultimate thing, is to link why these fundamentals are important and what they're going to achieve if we do get to scale, if we do create a company and make a product. I think that's the important part, to always kind of keep that link together.
So related is, right, that communication back to the need and then the science, but the scale between that is some of the engineering components that we have to address. And so this panel is called Frontiers. So it's strategies that are not at large scale or not completely deployed at the current moment, but hopefully they will be. And so what do you see as a major breakthrough that takes some of these technologies from the frontier level to the commonplace?
What breakthrough are we looking for as I'll refer to DAC as an industry, and I'm waving the flag for the entire industry, I guess, today. Well, there's a couple things. I mean, it's not just cost, right? As we show these charts, the cost to capture per ton. The big breakthroughs are going to be engagement through policy and ensuring that policy has longevity, right? Something we talked about last night is, yeah, we have these 45Q, IRA, if you're familiar with these types of credits, but how long are they going to be around? So we'll call that one breakthrough, is ensuring that there is a path towards this. And then it's material science at the end of the day. So that's been the biggest challenge, I think, for most companies in our space, is materials that survive. Because as we learn in working in refining or chemical processes, you have to turn it on, you want it to run forever, right? That's how you make the use of your capital. And you can withstand some OpEx, but you can't be shutting things on and off, right? If you're gonna address the problem, you wanna turn it on and let it keep going. And the big challenge right now is materials. We've made some big strides and we've got a good lifetime, but ultimately it's lifetime, it's performance, right? That's why, companies in oil and gas and chemical, it's the bulk of the research is in catalysis, right? Because fractions of improvement in your catalyst can increase your profits, but also then your yield, your selectivity, which then obviously benefits lifetime of the process. So I think it's policy driving the implementation, and then material science to drive the cost down through just robust processes.
I feel, again, many of us been thinking, how can we do better, right? Every day. I think one breakthrough we could and should have is really to build a community and ecosystem that give us some sort of a cushion that we can diversify our resources, source of resource I mean funding, space, people, that also allow actually trial and error, because many of these technologies, whether it's climate tech or I just came back from Boston called Tough Tech, right? I mean, all the circularity tech. It takes time, it takes years or decades to develop to be competitive with sort of an incumbent product. Think about plastic, how cheap, available, how cheap and abundant and easy and it can be produced, and replacing it, it's gonna take time. And also you have to do a lot of analytical side to actually avoid any unintended consequences. So that's, I guess that we just need to help each other more to sort of going through the good and bad times that would, again, allow some of the technology to survive and thrive in the long term. So that's really, I think, events like this and community building to help each other would be some breakthrough we need.
All right. So one of the things I learned that you know, I was so naive to jump into this entrepreneurship. I thought everything is as beautiful as I read a paper and write an equation. But actually, reality is different. But I think that the number one challenge is that how could you scale up, right? You can do it beautifully in the lab, but when you scale up to people say, can you produce tons of per hour? That is really completely make your process very difficult. The second thing that even your process is work doesn't mean that people will buy it, right? You have to have how do you compete, you know, with the existing technology, and how do you offer additional benefit? And if we, over the last many years, we were heavily relying on the government support because the addressing of climate and everything. But when that, you know, government switch, you have significant impact of the startup development. I think that the sustainability in terms of support is very different. When I visited that many years ago, when I started the company, probably 2018, and I went to one of the several battery companies in China. You can see that the Chinese government has enormous support about that the startup companies and engineering. Many of our professors, I was joking to DOE funding agency, I said, we are very good at publishing Nature and Science paper, but we're not even able to make a good battery here in the United States, right? Educating our student that has engineering skills, that can solve the real problem, that it become a unprecedented important at our higher education. I think that we are losing ourselves in terms that educating students who understand what is engineering. I think that is something I learned over the last few years.
Well, we sort of look forward to the afternoon where we'll talk more about scaling, which was brought up here as a nugget. One of the components about scale, that's what an engineer has done for a long time, but this problem means we need to scale quickly to handle solutions of how we interface with the needs for climate and for sustainability goals. And so maybe asking the question when you think through, you know, the startups that you all work with or in other capacities, yes, you're building new technology, but one way to potentially scale quickly is to look to the past and to think of what other technologies exist and what parts of those technologies can we utilize to move some of these processes forward. And so what can we learn from some of those past processes to maybe pull into your own technology to catalyze the rate of implementation? Or do you really see that these are areas that need to move fast and break things?
That's a great question. Let me share a story. All my first 10 years of research as a faculty was really continuing. We want to produce electricity out of wastewater. Like we would imagine there's enough electricity, there's enough energy, like I said, there's 10 times we can produce electricity out of wastewater, right? That's good. Wastewater treatment plant going to become a power plant. That's why I got to Princeton here, right? So, but then you realize there's so many cheaper, better alternatives of your electricity supply for wastewater. You can buy cheap solar, you actually can get wind, you get a geothermal. So they are cheaper, they are better, and they are more reliable than the expensive electricity I would produce, right? That's a certain, you can still publish good journal articles, you can still do teaching great class scientifically. Then slowly I realized, well, that's not a technology that is gonna work. I can still keep publishing, right? And so then I really that switched. Credit to actually many of the meetings we have actually at Ellinger Center is really worry with also our industry partners. You think, okay, in a way like you have to develop science and technologies that may actually work, right? So that's in many cases give you what I call user-inspired research. In many cases, you have to compare and then analyze, is this actually something gonna be really useful? Right, rather than publishing more papers. So that's, to me, that's why I switched to like, okay, this technology may work. It's actually gonna have quick impact, like Yiguang said, somebody gonna buy this. The moment actually you get the bank transfer from the client, that's a very happy moment, right? So that's sort of the things like you feel like that actually even guided my own research, my student research to say, okay, beyond the publishing a paper, can we actually make tangible impact in reality, in our industry? So that's sort of something I learned in the past 10 years since I've been in Princeton.
Yeah, I want to try to come back to the question that Michelle was talking about the scale up. That I try to give you an example. The first company we created, the Heat Nano. So we have a beautiful aerosol technology, just like used in jet engines. We make a cathode material beautifully in the laboratory. But when we come to scale up for a startup company, they ask us, can you produce a 10 kilogram per hour? I'll say, well, yes, we can, jet engine can produce gigawatt per hours, and so rocket engine gigawatt, So why not? So we try to increase the droplet size, try to make the materials. So my God, so once you increase the droplet size, all the cathode materials we produce will hollow. You are reducing a packing density, you are reducing the cyclability. We struggled for a year and a half. We could not solve this problem. So I said that how would today's battery company would make the cathode materials? They bake everything is co-precipitation. You drop everything into the water and you just store it for 1 week and then precipitate everything in the bottom. And that creates a lot of waste water. So can we do something that without water can do the same thing? So that really drives me to rethink how to address the problem, to learn from the current already existing scaled-up technology. We come up with an idea, and we see a bright potential going forward. That's why we try to keep innovating, keep thinking, and what we are educating students is not just publish good papers or file a patent. It is really educating students to how to think and how to solve a problem and using the principles we learn. And when we go graduate and go to society, we never know. There's always a new problem that nobody really run into at a college. But we have to figure out by ourselves and to solve that problem using successful examples before that can learn from it, learn from others from the past.
I like the scaling question. So I think for carbon capture space in general, I think that you have to address the first question is how fast you need to go. Really fast. So you don't actually even really have time to rinse and repeat, go fast, break things and all that. I mean, yes, we do that. You have to make decisions quickly, but I think the bigger thing is to scale our industry, you have to identify routes to get to scale, right? So yeah, we can build things in the lab and we do measurements on milligrams, right? So I think the important aspect of DAC to be commercially deployed and actually be a solution at the right cost and price points is where can we learn from others and leverage that. So that's, I think, the approach that we are taking, that I think many others are taking as well, is I don't have time to invent a new industry. So I have to leverage what is known and what is out there today, or utilize things that are being replaced. So if EVs are growing, then you have an entire automotive sector that has an entire supply chain that's going to go dormant. How do you leverage that, right? How do you, all these materials and all this capital that's already paid for, that people want to keep profiting from, right? Businesses, they want to keep using that capital. How do you leverage that as things pivot and learn? And manufacturing at scale has to be a copy-paste problem, right? Yes, in refineries, you can build the biggest thing in the world because you're going to build it once, it's going to last for 40 years, it's going to take you 10 years to build it. But that's a different type of problem. We have to build lots of repeat units, lots of things, build them quickly, and get them into different places. And I think that's the key, is leveraging what is known today and don't rely on creating new industries. While that's nice, it's going to take longer.
Well, with that, we'd like to open the floor to other questions from the audience, including students. And so we have some mic runners again, and we have one right up here. Again, say your name and where you're from.
Thank you. My name's Steve Anglin. I'm the Project Finance Director at the Clean Energy Fund of Texas. My question is for JR. Actually, I had a question for all three of you, but just in the essence of time. So I'm looking at financing a project in Texas, Corpus Christi, the CarbonVert project. You probably heard of it. It's one of the largest carbon capture projects in the world. And you really went into a lot of details, and I appreciate the slides. But my question is more of a financial question about financing. I mean, you talked about 45Q, but from what I'm seeing, there's a lot of struggles to get the money to pay for these projects. I just want to know how you guys are doing it. I saw your rendering and how you're working. How's that coming along, financially? That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, that's a good one, because as we are aware, there's not a dearth of government dollars available to build new things. So our approach, and this is, I think it's an important, and unfortunately for a lot of the audience, where you rely on DOE type dollars and things, we are not built on that, right? So yeah, we started with DOE money, and we have money from the Office of Naval Research, so the Department of Defense, but our approach has been to align our projects. So this one I showed you a picture of is again, government dollars, but the future ones after that are funded by corporations who want to use the technology. So even our next plant, which is, call it 10x larger than this, which is planned for startup late next year in the Midwest, that one is funded by corporations who have a vested interest in seeing this technology get to scale and to use it, right? So that's kind of how we've relied on it, is like these call it strategic and institutional kind of project funding agencies. So, well, this facility in New Jersey is not. This is called a catch and release. It's usually how people demonstrate, because you can't justify sequestration at a small scale. Sequestration is also only approved in a few places. Texas has some permits, Louisiana, Illinois, I think California just released some, and Wyoming. So not a lot of places, and those are Class 6 permits, but the wells themselves are, we'll call them infinitely large underneath, right? So it's a matter of where can you install the infrastructure to do the compression and whatever other additional pre-processing steps you need to do to go back down hole. But it's not really not that much space, right? The oldest sequestration site is in Illinois with ADM, Archer Daniel Midland. So they're sequestering CO2 off of their ethanol facility. It's not that large. The facility's large, right? They're making products and things, but what you need for the sequestration is actually pretty small. The plant to capture CO2 from the atmosphere would be very large if you try to get to scale. So you're talking acreage, right?
You talked a lot about getting our students to solve problems. Sorry, Chris Gregg. There's another part of this. I look at the climate tech boom that we've seen in recent years and would suggest that a lot of crazy money went off after a lot of crazy ideas. To what extent have we got to do better at ruling out bad ideas as part of our education process rather than just focusing on how to translate ideas to the market? There needs to be a better screening process so that we don't keep seeing such a huge amount of wasted VC money going into projects that die. Question for anyone on the...
And I agree with that. For example, there's a crazy money, and in the last 5 years, I start to see that suddenly America becomes so rich that the research dollars just like the rain outside. You just put a bucket and then collect it. And so they build so many hydrogen production center, for example, hubs, billions of dollars, even doesn't know what they want to do. I asked one of the CEO in New Jersey and Pennsylvania and of the hydrogen hubs, $1 billion. I said, what are you going to do? Are we going to build a building? See what I'm saying? So there's so easy money come in that it really create things. The country really doesn't have a long vision about the thoughts, right? Every time when your government changes, there's policy changes that create a disruption. But I think that one thing that I learned from my personal experience is that not only inspire students try to solve a big problem, don't work on decimal problem, and then they provide solutions to the world, that is one thing. And young people, normally they have two things, lower activation energy. When somebody says, they will jump on, very good, enthusiastic. Second, they see, okay, a professor from Princeton will say it, or from Harvard will say it, there might be a good thing to do. But really, the thing that we, in order for the first question about the funding and other things, we have to think about that the market and the industry. The big industry, they pour tens of billions of dollars already look at many things, right? So the lesson is that can you create a product that a big industry really buy it? I think that is the key. We can always start from DOE and from some venture capital to raise a couple $1 million to start up. That's not a problem. It's a problem that you create a product. It is a product that a big industry, they want badly it. So that is the key things. That avoid that you let the market to judge. Let that the big industry, they already pour billions of dollars and they will make the decision whether your product has value or not. Now, the typical today's AI, you can see the small business company bought by Google, bought by NVIDIA, and they quickly become one of the dominant. So big company play a big deal role in this kind of startup growth.
I love this panel that you all are really looking in the mirror and trying to figure out what is the practical answer to these questions and being really honest with yourselves. I'm Shannon Boughton. I work in waste management systems and recycling in the Global South. And one of the keys, I think, to scaling solutions is making sure that they are simple enough that they can be replicated in many of the systems where a lot of these technologies just won't work. So one of the challenges we face is what to do with organics in countries where the majority of the waste stream is actually post-consumer organics. And I was wondering, Jason, if you have any suggestions, solutions. We always end up with composting, but no one wants to buy it at the end of the day. So are there any things coming out of your lab that would be a good solution? And if not, is that maybe a challenge to all of you to not just look at what industry will buy in the United States, but also what could work at scale in the Global South?
That's a good question, a tough one. and I used to have some project with Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation that spent hundreds of millions of dollars to reinvent the toilet. I mean, sort of same organic waste issue. I mean, I sort of, when I do my reflection on things, I have many hammers, right? I'm trying to find, I have technology for this, and but I don't find the nails, right? So that's a sort of, in many cases, I guess, as a waste management person myself, I would say, okay, where's the market? What kind of, like you said, compost? New York actually just had a big project on composting, right? So where the markets can be. I mean, maybe they don't need fertilizer or compost, or would they need energy? For example, I mean, there's actually increasing trend on gasification, on sort of, would energy be something people need, right? Or would a fuel be something they need? Or so sort of in many cases, I guess what I was reflecting on was really, in many cases, especially scientists, we have great idea. Let's try this, right? And publish it, and then forget about it and come up with another idea. Right? So I have too many hammers in my toolbox, yet I don't have a project to work on. So certainly in many cases, I felt probably more marketing analysis and really looking into the customer side. That's what we call user-inspired research, or actually development, probably gonna help. I really don't have a specific answer solution. You definitely know better than me on what kind of things we can produce through the waste stream. That'll be, but my only answer would be probably it's going to be tailored depending on the local markets, whether it's energy products or some other things, right? Or even building material people have done. So that is really looking into the markets.
So hi, Bob, come from Deloitte, and yeah, wonderful discussion. First of all, I agree that the most important invention is ammonia. So I'm just going to put a comment in there. We don't have 8 billion people without the Haber-Bosch process. You showed, and this could be to any of the panelists, but JR, you showed like, okay, at this kind of a cost, right? You could get this much gigatons of CO2 with the DAC. We're going to need DAC. So I would like to reverse the question, and it could apply to the other technologies. How low do you think we can go, like run it in that direction? And the same might apply to clean ammonia and the minerals.
I think the Haber-Bosch produce ammonia. You have a Nobel Prize named about it. And I think that is a very efficient process. I think that with today's technology on the horizon, it's still very difficult to compete with it. And innovation is needed. For example, even with that, this kind of new plasma catalysis, we double the efficiency to 40%. But if you want to compete with Haber-Bosch, and not only that, you have to increase more about the efficiency to 50% or more, but also that you have to scale up. That is really challenging in annoying me.
I'll take a crack at it. How low can we go? Limbo, right? In the song. I'm not going to give you a straight answer because the thing is, you know, we saw this 15 years ago or so when DOE said, oh, post-combustion capture, it's going to be $20 a ton. It's not. It's what, 30-something is the best we can do, and it's with the same technology that we had 15, 20 years ago. It hasn't changed. There's been some slight improvements, but it's where it is, right? And I use that as an anecdote to say you can throw out numbers, but then there's the reality of what you can actually achieve. You know, we have forecasts, right, that 1 to 200 is very, very reasonable, but that's at what we call nth plant, right? Very large scale. Sub $100 is going to be highly dependent on where are you located, right? So your geography is going to play a big role in this because that determines kind of your efficiency. How much is your power, right? Because are you using subsidized solar or are you using hydroelectric, wind, whatever it may be? And then what's your end product, going to look like, right? If you're doing a sequestration play, that's kind of known, like, all right, I'm given, my process delivers 1 bar of CO2, then I have to compress it and clean it up and so forth, right? That's all like known. You're not going to really improve that. But if you have other outlets for that CO2, whether it's fuels production, right? So e-fuels, like we're doing with the Office of Naval Research, right? So those requirements may be different. But then it also justifies what your price point is, right? Because your product, right? So it's hard to say. You can do the energy numbers, and I can't remember off the top of my head, is it 1,100 kilowatts per ton, I think, is like there's a minimum where like basically you get to some threshold, don't quote me on the number, but there's a number threshold on your power play that says if I'm below this, then I don't need to build excess renewable power, right? It's like if I can be so efficient, which then you end up hitting towards that thermodynamic minimum, which is the demixing of CO2 from the atmosphere, which isn't very favorable. So there's that, and then your capital, right? And so sorry to long answer, but it comes back to how can I lower my costs through leveraging what is known and out there today, right? If I don't have to build an entire new industry, those costs come down faster and get even lower, right? But if I have to build, say, I'll use a generic example. If my CO2 sorbent is a thing that we just invented in the lab but doesn't exist, right? No one makes it. You can maybe buy the backbone, the raw materials. But if you have to go create an entire industry to make your material, it's going to take longer and it's going to be a lot more expensive because all that capital's got to be amortized, right? And built, right? So use what's known, tweak it, paint it a different color, whatever you want to call it, right? And that's going to allow you to get those costs down. But I think sub 200 is very fair. And that's without credits necessarily.
All right. I think in the interest of time, we have the opportunity for other discussion throughout the day. It's built into to the schedule. So we've heard a lot. As I promised in the intro, I took a complex initial problem that Andre proposed, and we made it more complex by talking about other streams that we need to address. And the interesting research and scientific and engineering breakthroughs that are occurring in lab scale or at startup scale, and then how we start to transition that to larger scale, which we'll address more in the panel after lunch. It's fruitful for our students and for others to hear this interesting and very important progress. And so I want to thank again JR, Jason, and Yiguang for their time and for their insights that we had this morning. Thank you all for joining us, and I think I'll pass it over to Chris for a couple housekeeping announcements.